Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Big Data Conference 2022. I'm Mauro and will be your MC from the track Varia. Let me just introduce our first speaker, Radu. Hi, Radu.
Hi guys.
Radu will talk us about keeping our data secure, in particular from artificial intelligence and machine learning. So I just to you, the stage is yours. Just have a great presentation, Radu.
Thank you for the introduction. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to my presentation. First of all, let me thank you for all coming here in this virtual conference, in this at this virtual event. And as you can see on the screen, our topic for today is AI, ML, and more exactly the data that we are processing, we are storing, we are getting from different models that we are using to extract insights and so on, and what we can do with that data to secure it, to ensure that we don't have any kind of leaks, that the right people or the right services are accessing them, and also to ensure that we avoid to make publicly data that are confidential or are customer specific and so on. And my talk is particularly relevant for those of you who are using especially Microsoft Azure, ML, and AI services, or the ones that you are involved in different systems, in different applications, where data is used, data is manipulated and fetched to different different kind of system. So during the next, I would say, 45 minutes, we'll focus on this, and we'll try to get an insight as better as possible. If you don't mind, I like to leave question until the end because I have only one screen and it would be pretty hard to take a look on the chat and so on. So we'll have 5-7 minutes at the end of the session for the Q&A. For the Q&A, and also after my talk, feel free to reach me out over LinkedIn or over Twitter to talk more about data, about ML, about cloud security, about how we can build a secure data layer inside Microsoft Azure. Now, before going forward, I really like and I really like to share with you one of the quote of Gibran that say, if you reveal your secret to the wine, you should not blame the wine for revealing them to the trees. And in the end, we are the main responsibilities. We need to take into consideration what we expose through which kind of endpoints and what we do to ensure that we are building a secure system. We don't need to rely only on the cloud vendor, only on the supplier, only on the suppliers. We have the tools, we have the feature, we have the systems. We just need to be aware of what are the risks and what we can do to reduce the risk, to reduce the footprint that is available, that is public available. I would like, before going forward, I would like to say a few words about my own background. My journey on Microsoft Azure and in cloud started in 2010 for a project on automotive, connecting cars to Microsoft Azure. And starting from then, I was most involved, almost I would say 95% of my time, working with Microsoft Azure and on with AWS. I'm also Microsoft Regional Director and Azure MVP. I'm a big fan of home automation from the software point of view, but also doing my own small devices around the house and so on. And I'm a big coffee lover, so I really enjoy a good coffee and playing with different coffee machines to see what kind of different tastes you can extract. I'm group head of cloud inside the and Dava. And if you have any kind of question related to these three main topics that I really love, feel free to reach me out anytime. Now let's jump to our main topic for today. And before going forward, I would like to share with you some statistics to understand where we are now. So 80% of security breaches involve privileged credentials. This means that data it is stored secure, but the credentials that are used to read, to write, to store the backups are not stored in a safe way. And around half of the databases are not encrypted. The databases to which we are pushing the output of our AI ML system or from where we're fetching the data are not all the time encrypted, meaning that if, for example, if you have a backup of somebody puts their hands on the storage, physically or virtually, in the end, they will be able to get this data. I remember that in 2015, I was at one of the last TechEds that took place in Chicago. And during a 90-minute session, a security session, they showed to us using free open source tools how you can get full access to an Azure, to a SQL backup that was encrypted and was using a very strong password. So even if everything is encrypted and you're doing it the right way, still you need to protect the backups. You need to protect the data that you have. Now, what is very interesting here? Cryptojacking is very common, and at least 25% of organizations have cryptojacking activity within their environment, meaning that one of four of us was involved directly or indirectly in a cryptojacking activity. And to understand how important it is to secure data in a secure manner, this is an example in that happened, I think, in 2016, if I'm not wrong, for Vim, where even if they had the backups secure, encrypted, and so on, they put their backup on an unsecure environment on an S3 that was public available over internet. It was public available for around 1 hour or 2 hours, but there were a lot of downloads of that backups. There were some customer data. They say that was not very sensitive data, but still that customer data were made public available to the internet. So it's very important to know exactly how we store the data, to which we are exposing, and how we are handling it. So what is our main mission for today? Is to identify exactly what are the features, what are the services that we can use to ensure that the systems that we are building and they're fetching data to an AI or ML systems are using the best features that are allowing us to expose the data in a secure way without any kind of problem. I want to give you a very simple example using Azure Form Recognizer. What is Azure Form Recognizer? It is a tool that is provided by Azure. It's part of Azure Cognitive Services that is allowing us to process images or documents and to extract data, not only OCR, meaning from image to text, but also to analyze the text, to do the labeling, and so on. Now, what I would like to show to you, or to make things a little bit more relevant, is let's say that we are using the Azure Form Recognizer Studio, that is just an interface that give you the ability to train the model and to do different things with it. If we go to browse, we choose a file. I will upload, let's say, this airplane ticket that I have here, and I will click on analyze. It will analyze the content. We will get the results. We'll be very happy with the results. But now my question to all of you is the following: where this data was uploaded, for how long will be stored, and who will be able to access it. And this is why it is very important to be aware with what is happening behind the scene. If we do a stop back and we look at Form Recognizer, what we will identify that when you're using the Form Recognizer, even if you're using from the studio, the one that we took a look behind the form recognizer, you also need to specify when you do processing training, or you are processing some information beside the form recognizer. Also, you need a storage account that is used to upload the content. Now, the tricky part is with the storage account that you might forget about it, or you are just uploading content, and you are forgetting that over there inside a specific container, you put information that you are forgetting that it is stored there. Somebody from the team might uh, still have access to it, even if he wouldn't be allowed, or somebody else is make that storage public available. So even if from the user interface, a person that is doing the training model is not seeing directly that there's a storage behind the scene, because he might not do the configuration. Maybe it was done by somebody from the DevOps or infrastructure team. When they confirm when they've done the configuration of the Form Organizer Studio, we need to remember and we need to take into account all the inputs, all the outputs, where they are stored, for how long, and so on. And the same story with the output, because the output in this case, it is a JSON, but we need to know exactly where this JSON is stored. In this context, it is configured to be stored in the same container. So as you can see here, we have the output, but still, we need to define a flow to ensure that this data will be automatically removed later on, or to have a policy, to have the data governance on top of that, and so on. And this can be a little bit of challenging, because, for example, if you take a look on how many services Microsoft Azure is providing for us, there are more than 20 that are related to AI ML system that you can train or are coming as software as a service. If you take a look, for example, on the database and storage, we have the same story. A lot of services, and for each of them, when you're starting to use them, you need to be aware exactly how you are handling them, who has access to it, and so on. But behind the scene, there are some base concepts, some base things that we need to be aware, and we need to take this into account. And this is why I would like to do together with you in the next 30 minutes. Take a look on the core concepts when we are configuring Azure SQL, storage, we have configuration, and to ensure that we are aware of the best practices and all the things that are behind the scenes that can help us to build a secure system. Now, a very short introduction. Don't forget that at the moment in time when you are using a service that is provided by a cloud vendor like AWS, Google Cloud, or Microsoft Azure, the security side on the data, on the services, and so on is a shared responsibility between you and between the cloud vendor. A lot of the time, even if it's a joint responsibility, there's a lot of features, there are a lot of services that are built in that are allowing you to secure. Not all of them are by default configured in the way when you like, or some of them automatically are available only if you are using premium tiers or more expensive ones. So at the moment in time when you're building an AI system and you need to have a specific storage, please consider at what tier you have the features that are required by the organization for which you are building the system, or by different compliance regulation that you need to meet up. And also, we need to not forget that we have the storage, we have the data layer, and this is what we'll talk today to be able to secure. But beside this, many times also we have some computation layer that is used, and also we need to ensure that also we are securing them in the right way. The first topic that I would like to tackle, and I think that we have 7 or 8 perspective of AI, ML, and data security, is the service status. It's very important to know for each cloud vendor what kind of service, what kind of functionality you are using. There's a story, I think 1 year or 2 years ago, I think that happened in 2021, in end of August, there was a security issue when you were connecting Azure Cosmos DB to an data analytics ML system. And the root cause was that there was an open source library that was used that had some security issues behind the scene. Now, what people forgot to mention when that thing happened is that that service was in a public preview. What is important to know when you're using different services from AWS, from Microsoft Azure, or from GCP. And this is an example from Microsoft Azure that we have a service that is available, can have three different stages: private preview, public preview, and GA, general availability. For production environment or when you have sensitive data, you should only use services that are in the GA, general availability. You have the official SLA, you have the formal support, and it was better integrated from the security point of view and well tested. When there are services in public preview or features or in a private preview, be very aware from the security point of view if you are putting their customer data or sensitive information, because there might be some problem and there's no official SLA, no official support for this service. So only GA. And when you know that a service is in a GA or functionality, first thing that you can notify is that in the directory service that I was showing to you, you will see that for preview services, you have a small preview logo, but also in the documentation page, you will find it. And also for different features that are part of, for example, in this case of cognitive search, as you can see on the bottom right side on the screen. Also, they specify exactly what is the current status. It is public preview, it is in a GA, and so on. Sometimes we have timelines related to when they will go on GA. Sometimes we don't have these timelines, and we need to consider them. Another root cause is that I identified that can create data breach when you're playing with and when you're crunching data with an ML system, for example, are wrong configuration of secrets and storing them in the wrong way. Because secret management is not something that is all the time in the scope of the people that are working on the model or are looking on different ways how they can extract the data. Nevertheless, we need to consider exactly where we are storing the key, the tokens, or in which way we are connecting, for example, to Azure SQL. And I will come back a little bit later on this topic. But not all the time the fastest way to get a reliable connection, to get access to a storage, to a database, it is the best one or it is the right one. Maybe for a POC, it could work. But once you put production data, customer data there, you need to be very, very careful. One of the most common ways how people are accessing different storages are access keys and connection string. And that's pretty okay, depending on what kind of service you are using. And all of them are stored in the configuration. And there are two things that we are forgetting. First of all, we should never have this access information like a connection string or a token stored in the configuration file or in our Python script or in a configuration file that is used by the Python script. Even if it's more easily, even if it is easy to test something, if that storage, if that database has sensitive information, you should do in another way. If you're talking about Azure, we have the Key Vault or dedicated HSM. And basically a Key Vault is a secure place where you can put the connection string, the certifications, the keys, and to ensure that only the right people or only the right system would have access to it. There are some specific features that would allow you, for example, for different environments, different teams, or different services to have access only to a key or only to a certification for which environment. So you can play around, you can do the right configuration for each of them. Another big mistake is that people are forgetting where they should store the information that would allow them to access that vault. For machines that are used for development or for defining the models and so on, I highly recommend you to ensure that this information are stored, for example, in environment variables from the operating system. Because by default, if you're using, for example, the key vault, you can configure the library that gives you access to the key vault to ensure that it can fetch automatically this information from the environment variables to get the connection to the key vault. The advantage by storing them in that location is that the people that would get access to environment variables would be only the one that would have access using your account to that machine. So even if somebody else will log to your machine and things like that, the environment variables will be only for yourself. Another thing that we need to consider is if we are focusing only on crunching the data, getting the insights of it, we might not have the end-to-end teams that are investing and are building the pipelines. I'm not referring to the data pipelines and data and the ETL pipeline, but the pipeline that would build the solution, deploy it, and so on. But still, we need to keep an eye on what kind of secrets we are putting in the configuration, we are putting in the source code and in the repos and so on. They are very simple tools, like for example, Git secrets that are very easy to configure and are enabling us to ensure that we are scanning our output of our work to ensure that we are not pushing to a repo sensitive information, because once we are pushing to a repo, if some other people that shouldn't have access to it would be able to get that secrets, that configuration, they would get access to our systems. Another thing that we need to be aware of, especially nowadays when we are working remotely from our home, maybe from exotical places and so on, is that even if we have only 4 people that have access, if one of their machine is compromised, you still want to ensure that by accessing that repo, they will not be able to get access to environments, to the storages, to the model that you are building and you are using behind the scene. There are a lot of tools on the market for secret scanning and so on. What you can see now on the screen is a comparison between the main ones. I would like to highlight 2 of them. The first one is Spectral Ops that I really like from the user interface that is provided. They have a pretty good ML model behind the scene to identify the false positive ones, but it's pretty complex. So for large applications, it's a very good option, but for smaller ones, if you don't have already knowledge about spectral ops, it might be pretty hard or pretty clumsy to use. The second one that it works very well, especially when you need to do an MVP or a POC or you have an internal internship, is Git All Secrets. In 1 hour time, you can look on the documentation, have it configured, and play with it. It's pretty limited, it's very basic, but for an MVP or for learning, it is great. It is exactly what you are looking for. I would like to go forward, and the third for that I would like to tackle is access tokens and role-based access control. One of the biggest challenge that I see by Microsoft are exposing endpoints in different ways, and you can get access very easily to them through storage, through access tokens. Can be a connection string, can be a shared access signature. For just to give you an example, if you take for example a look on the form recognizer, we have the one second. Oh, this is the storage. It's perfect. Also the storage. Let me jump to the storage. Most of the people, or it's very common to get access to that storage by taking the storage account keys. So we have the access keys, and in most of the cases, people will just use key one or key two to be able to get access to the storage. The same thing for form recognizer and so on. That's okay, but the biggest problem is if somebody put their hand on that key, he can do ugly things. And additional to it is not only getting access to the keys themselves, but also sometimes the keys giving you access more than you should do. So maybe not only read operation, read, write, modify, and so on. And if you have a system that's only fetched, you have the system that is running the model and only fetch the data from different inputs. From that input, he should not be allowed to do any kind of write operation. So you need to ensure that you're building and you're limiting access. One way how we can do this is Azure role-based access control. And what is Azure role-based access control? It is a way how you can provide access to any kind of resources that are running on Azure using three main components. The first one is the security principle. Basically, to who you want to get access. Can be a user, can be a group, and also can be a service principal. And that's very important. What does a service principal mean? Means any other service part of Microsoft Azure can be another system like Azure Form Recognizer, can be cognitive services, can be Azure Synapse, can be, for example, if you go here on the directory and we go on AI and machine learning services, can be any system that you are using to do ML, AI, data processing, and so on. And this is very, very important because you don't need to handle the access. You just specify from the configuration, this is the service principal, that is the instance of the service to which you want to grant specific access. After that, you have the role. The role in the end is what kind of operation. Now, depending on at what you want to get access, to give access might be read, write, modifying, fetch the specific data, and so on. And you have the scope. And the scope is to who you are, to what system you, what kind of resources from who can access. Can be a resource like Azure Storage, Azure SQL, can be more specific for an Azure Storage, like for example, a specific file, a specific CSV file, can be a resource group, subscription, and manage group. And basically you do an assignment. Who, what, and what is the scope, on what services they can have access to it, and nothing more than that. The challenge, I would say, with role-based access control is that the learning curve is a little bit higher, and the initial configuration takes more time versus if you just get the access keys and you can jump to use them to access a storage in just a few seconds. It's like for example with Azure SQL, it's more easily to get a username and password versus to configure the role-based access control, or especially in projects where the main focus is on building the model, building the ML model. The challenge is that the team itself has very good skills on that side, but they don't have all the time available in the team somebody from infrastructure, somebody that is doing the automation and the configuration to help them to do this part, to do the security configuration. So in the end, when you're using Azure, when you're using Microsoft Azure services, you should ensure that all the time you are using Azure roles-based access control to get access to different resources: computation, ML services, storage, data, and so on. Now, the nice part here is that once you're configuring Key Vault and Azure AD together with role-based access control, you can get something very nice. And I really like this security layer that you are getting almost for free. What is Azure App Configuration? It is just a repository, a service inside Microsoft Azure that is giving you the ability to store all the configuration that you have inside the system, inside the application, and just to refer from that. But end to end, you get a system that different services get access to tokens, to different secrets, even if it are secrets that are used to access third parties, like for example an SAP on a database that is running on-prem, where you still cannot use maybe a role-based access control, you still need to use a username and password or a token. You can store them in Key Vault, and the application, to be able to access that one, would do a request to app configuration. But even if the app configuration have a reference where you specify the key secret that is allowing you to get access to an on-premise storage, it is stored in the Key Vault. That system that would require access would not be allowed to access the value from the Key Vault as long as that system doesn't have access, role-based access to control, to access from Vault to that specific secret. So it's not all the systems that have full access to the app configuration storage would have also access to all the keyboards. So you can manage at a very granular level exactly who has access to what. But as I said, the learning curve and the initial configuration might be a little bit time consuming at the beginning. The fourth item that I have in the list and that I would like to talk about is storage. Now, the biggest problem with storage is that, as we've seen a few seconds ago, and I'm sharing now in the portal, is that it's very easily to go to access keys, to get the key or to get the connection string, where also the key is included, and after that to start to just use it for things that you would need. The challenge here is that even if you have access keys, even if you have shared access signature, you need to ensure that you're using them in the right way, and how you should manage them. So first of all, as I said, we have the account name, we have the access key, but this is not the recommended way how you should get access to it, because it's very easily for somebody to be able to put the hand on it. We have the two concepts. The first one we already talked about, Azure AD role-based access control, that is available for Azure storage. And the second one that I would like to take a little bit is shared access signature, where in the end you're generating a token, but you're generating a token only for a limited time for all the storage or for just a specific container. You can even specify a whitelist of IPs. What are the IPs, public IPs, that can be used to access through that shared access signature, through that token? And that's very, very useful because, for example, you can have systems that you will say, okay, at the end of each month for 1 day or 2 days, they can fetch data from that storage to be able to process, to crunch the data. And you can have this kind of keys, and you can have a system that would generate the access to it. The challenge is the following. You do the limitations of access through the public endpoints. You are using role-based access control internally. You have all the firewall rules set and so on. But you have a third-party system, let's say an on-prem system or a system that is running on AWS, that would need to get access to that storage, to the output of the analyze that you've done. How you can expose this? One is through API, but you might say we don't have enough time, or we want a more easy way how a third party can consume that. And you can go without any kind of problem to use shared access signature just to provide to a system access for a limited time. What we should consider is that the lifetime of that shared access signature that we are generating should be very short. Don't think about the days. Don't think about 6 hours, 12 hours. Think about half an hour, 45 minutes. It's not a problem if that key would expire and you will need to regenerate it. When you generate a new key, you just need to provide an endpoint. And once you're doing the authentication and the handshake through your internal identity access management, you can update the key and provide uh, a new key. So try to keep the shared access signature from the lifetime as short as possible. The next item that we have on the list is SQL, Azure SQL. Why I put it here, flavors? Because there are a lot of ways how you can run SQL inside Microsoft Azure. You have Azure SQL databases. You can have dedicated machines. You have the SQL Server on virtual machine. You have the Azure SQL databases. You can even have the managed part on top of it, and so on. So there are a lot of flavors, but in the end, the way how you provide access to them is very very similar. And many times we are forgetting that except that username and password, as we talked until now, we have the role-based access control, but additional to that, also there are some features that already exist there, and sometimes we are forgetting. Encryption, firewall, and IP rules. And why I'm mentioning the IP rules? Because I've seen a lot of projects where we have the IP rules, and by default, for example, Azure SQL database is closed, is not cannot be accessed from the public internet. And what people are starting to do, adding, for example, the IPs that are used by the technical team. And when the technical team, because they're working from home, the IPs are changing because they might have static IP, they will update again. And after a few months, they end up with a lot of IPs. Nobody knows exactly who owned that IP, if it's still used or not. Versus trying to identify exactly what are the IPs that are used. For example, if you have a VPN connection, you could limit the surface by using only the IPs that are used by the organization that you're part of. And all the time, if you want to play from your own machine, you could just open the VPN connection to the organization that you're part of that would use their own IPs. And also the way how we do the authentication. Don't use username and password. Use role-based access control to be able to get access to it. And on top of that, nowadays I think that there is a trend to forget, I would say, because of lack of time, lack of availability, that beside getting full access to a database, you can specify exactly what are the operation and what tables people can have access to it and with what kind of operation, and also the object level permission that I would like to talk in a few seconds. Beside this, we have the encryption, but nowadays most of them are configured out of the box, and also we have the threat detection that is enabled by automatically, and we can identify exactly who accessed what. Now, two things that we need to remember is column level encryption, where you can specify exactly that only specific users, for example, have access to this column. And for example, the support team that wouldn't be part of that group would see a random value or a value that you would specify by default, like for example, O and things like that. Also, you have the cell level encryption. That is the same thing, but you are doing this at cell level, meaning that depending on the role, they might be able to see different information or not. The combination between the column and cell level can and is allowing us to do configuration of databases in such a way that, for example, even if technical team, when you're playing with the model, needs to access some sensitive data, you would be able to see and you'll be able to access only the ones that are allowed to play, to do the training, sometimes using real data, but not the data that you would say that are too sensitive to be able to access through this kind of system. I would like to mention two more things through the APIs, and we need to ensure that when we're exposing an API, when we're working with them, we are securing them in the right way. And even if we use, for example, cognitive service and other services, and also we have a custom API, we need to ensure that we are securing it. And sometimes it's much better to move the protection from the computation to system like Azure Application Gateway. We have where, except the load balancer, also we have the web application firewall that would protect us through to OAuth top 10, like for example XSS or SQL injection. The last thing that I would like to remind is that we have out of the shell services like Microsoft Defender for Cloud and Azure Advisor that analyze in real time all the services, all the configuration, and how we are using the functionality. And beside compliancy, they can give us alerts, they can notify us when we don't follow the recommendation and the best practices from the configuration and security point of view. But we need to take a look on the Defender or to have the alerts that would notify us, would pop up. And also, what is nice on Microsoft Defender that also not only the recommendation, but also for each thing that is identified, in most of the cases, we have we have ways how we can fix it. We can, and many times it's just a click distance to secure a SQL instance or a storage or other services that we are using. Now, what is my personal conclusion would be that it is our own responsibility to ensure that we are not only building a great model, a great AI system, but also we are securing them. And most of the features, most of the capability are already available there. We just need to know how to use them. And most important thing, we need to be aware of them. I highly recommend to take a look on web architecture framework and for the security pillars from each cloud vendor, or depending with what kind of cloud vendor you are using. And it's not a high a lot of investment, because for example, and what I want to show to you here, for example, for this encryption, we already have all the recommendations in place, all the best practices, for example, for Azure ML, and we just need to take a look on them and to ensure that we are following the one that are also relevant for us, for our context, for our uh, type of project that we are implementing. So thank you for having me here. We still have, I think, 3 minutes to go. So if you have questions now, feel free to put them now, or I'm available on LinkedIn and Twitter to.
Yeah, thank you, Radu. Very clear presentation. Also, from our side, that we have to remember that we GDPR, most of things that we showed us are now mandatory. So we cannot say, I don't know, or I'll put security later. We have to. And this kind of tool are great to automatize everything and to have alert. And one of the question is, and we can also check if we are using services, or if we are moving data, for example, outside Europe. So because I think we have the same problem because we manage not our data, but we are managing data of other people. So we have also to check that we have all the permission to move this data outside of Europe, for example. Okay. So thank you, Radu, for your presentation. If you have any other question, as I said, is free to reach we have Twitter or LinkedIn. So we see you the next and the next talk. Bye.